Hello, and thank you for joining us at MassLive's debate for the 1st Hampden, New Hampshire Senate District. I am Dan-glaun with MassLive, and with me tonight are the candidates, Democratic State Senator Eric Lesser and Republican Chip Harrington from Ludlow. So we're going to start off with opening statements from each candidate. Eric, feel free to begin.
Well, thanks so much for having us, Dan. Thanks to the great team here at MassLive for hosting this, and thank you to you, Chip, for your service and for stepping forward in this election season. I've been your state senator for 2 years, and together we've gotten a lot done. We've worked on new job training programs through the Lower Pioneer Valley Education Collaborative, new investments at STIC and HCC to close the skills gap, get more jobs in the advanced manufacturing, high-tech sector. We've taken on substance abuse, one of the most serious crises we face as a community, getting a handle on the substance abuse crisis. We've brought down the price of Narcan by 2/3 through a bill I authored and filed, was signed into law by the governor just last year. We've worked collaboratively to close the pharmacy shopping loophole, crack down on the flood of illegal pill shopping happening in our communities, giving law enforcement and public health officials new tools to crack down on that practice, protect our families in the process. And we've beefed up enforcement and penalties around things like fentanyl, a very dangerous additive to heroin that can make it 50 to 100 times more potent and more deadly than even traditional heroin, which is, of course, very deadly in and of itself. And we've done a lot more. For example, new arts and cultural district. We're here in downtown Springfield, just a few blocks away, as a new cultural district we worked on through Mass Development, funding through the Mass Cultural Council to make a reality, a new innovation district that we also sit right at the center of, which we worked on collaboratively with Mass Development, Department of Economic Development and Housing to bring in that investment, bring in that attention. So there's quite a lot we've done, and there's a lot more we want to do, which is why we're here tonight to have a robust and I think a really important discussion about the future of our region, the future of our state, and what are those big things we need to be working on to ensure equality and opportunity for all of our families, whether it's high-speed east-west rail service or expanding kindergarten expansion grants, universal pre-K, another issue we've worked on. So we're 2 weeks away from the election, and in fact voting has already started in a lot of communities here in Western Mass through the early voting. You can go and vote now or tomorrow when the voting locations open again, and I hope we've earned your trust and your confidence for a second term.
Thanks, Eric. Chip.
Thank you, Dan. I feel like I'm on the Jimmy Fallon show. This is kind of nice, the nice red couch. But thank you to everybody at MassLive for putting this together. I actually, quite frankly, wish we had more debates. It's unfortunate that some of our other media outlets aren't doing debates this year. But I am Chip Harrington. I'm running for the state Senate seat because I feel like many of you out there, I'm working twice as hard and making less money than I did even 10 years ago. I work 2 jobs. I've been running my own business for the last 13 years, and that's gotten increasingly difficult in a very tough economy. And I'm also a part-time police officer in my hometown as well, too, which I truly enjoy doing that. Just a little bit about my background besides my professional career. I've lived in this district my entire life. My wife and I have raised our children here. They're both publicly school educated. My son Connor is in the Air Force, serving in Japan right now. And my daughter Riley just graduated from Ludlow High School last year, and she's attending Worcester State, studying to be an elementary education school teacher. And the reason I got into this race is kind of as what I started off saying, that things are difficult out here. And I know many of you watching this right now feel exactly what I'm saying, that we are sort of in this economic desert out here in the Pioneer Valley. The eastern part of the state's doing very well. Other parts of the New England area are doing very well. But we have been losing population because there are not good enough jobs paying in this area, good enough well-paying jobs for people to stay here. So we're losing population. Young people are not staying here. They're moving out of the area, and they're choosing to do that. We can do better. I know we can do better. I feel very strongly that public safety and economic development go hand in hand, and they get tied into each other. We need to increase the level of public safety and increase the level of law enforcement officials we have in this area, because that's going to help out economic development in the long run. There's a lot of good things that are taking place, but we need much more. And having lived in this area for my entire life, running a business, I am well equipped to represent you in the state house. I'm not looking to run for governor. I'm not looking to run for Congress. I don't want to run for anything else other than this position right here. I'm going to use this position to the best of my ability to represent you, not as a stepping stone to another job someplace down the road. I think you deserve better than that, and having lived here my whole life, I think I can represent that to you. I know I can do a very good job in the Massachusetts State Senate. So thank you very much for tuning in, and I look forward to the question and answers we're going to have here tonight.
Thank you, Chip. That divide between eastern and western Massachusetts is actually the subject of our first question. It comes to us from MassLive reader Fran Bogdanowicz of Longmeadow. She asks, what initiatives and efforts will you be targeting to attract private sector employment to the greater Springfield area? We often see how the Boston area is growing with new construction, new employers moving in and expanding. And in Springfield, all we hear about is a casino and a train station. So please be specific as to how you would approach attracting new economic development to this region. And Chip, you can begin.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I do feel that public safety and economic development go hand in hand. One thing I talked about 2 years ago was something called gateway cities. Gateway cities is for communities around the size of 35,000 to about 250,000. So Chicopee and Springfield fall well within that. There's currently not a real public safety component to that. And I think that needs to be done. There needs to be some funding put into public safety specifically for that, so that we can revitalize our neighborhoods. Government has a role to develop things, but the private sector should be incentivized to bring more jobs into this area that we have. So if we can add a public safety component, it's going to clean up these neighborhoods. It's going to clean up some of the storefronts. Right where the office is that I've been using on Sumner Ave, there's too many boarded up buildings over there. And there's too many boarded up buildings in Chicopee and Ludlow and other places as well too. Those areas need to be cleaned up. New streetscaping, more lighting, public safety, parking for people where they can feel safe when they're going to go in the area. That's going to bring small businesses to this area. But on a larger global scale, I guess you can say, precision manufacturing is incredibly important in this area. There's a tremendous amount of jobs that are completely unfilled. One thing I've talked about recently is that we need to start reintroducing in our elementary schools more trades to encourage kids to get into the trades. We're so hyper-focused on getting kids to college by passing this test that we're taking our eye off the ball. If we can introduce some kind of trade into the middle school level, these kids can kind of get their hands dirty and get involved in a trade to see whether they like it or not. We've got some great trade schools in the area, but usually those students have to make a decision by their freshman or sophomore year whether they want to go that track or not. Some students may find out early on that that's the way they want to go, but they need to be incentivized to do that. With precision manufacturing, that's where we can get some people going right out of high school into really well-paying jobs. And there's a need in this area for those specific jobs. And we'll get into more detail later about how we can incentivize more businesses to get here, but I don't want to take up more time than I
Thanks
need.
so much, Chip.
Well, thanks for the question. It's an important one. It's really at the heart of what this is all about, because let's be honest, the default for us in Western Massachusetts is to get left out and left behind. And what we've seen is, and the data really shows this, is that overall the economy in Massachusetts is actually doing pretty well. Our unemployment rate statewide is lower than the national average. Our income levels are higher than the national average. We've recovered from the Great Recession faster than the national average. But the important piece of that is it's not felt here in Western Massachusetts. And the statistics do show, as Chip said, that we are losing our young people. We're not retaining enough of our young families. And we're not building out and growing our economy fast enough and at the speed we need to improve lifestyles. So what do we do about that? Well, there's a lot of things that we've been working on, and there's a lot more things that we want to continue to push forward on. I'm grateful to hear that Chip is a supporter of our Gateway Cities initiative. That was a program that actually began under Governor Deval Patrick, has continued under Governor Baker, and I'm a member of the Gateway Cities Caucus in the Senate and will be potentially assuming a leadership role, I hope, or would like to in the next term. What does that mean? It means coordinating efforts around economic development in the cities like Springfield that have been working hard to better connect themselves to the innovation and the knowledge-focused economies all around us. So what are the things we need to do very specifically? Right now in the 4 counties of Western Massachusetts, there are more than 7,000 vacant positions in advanced manufacturing and precision machining, as Chip mentioned. More than 7,000 vacant jobs, open positions for people to take right now. These are very, very good jobs that can pay median salaries of around $70,000 a year. The issue is that we're not producing enough skilled and qualified workers in our local schools and in our training centers to meet that demand. Just think about the untapped potential there of 7,000 positions paying $70,000 a year going unfilled. Think about the families that can't buy homes. Think about the other development and the other output that's lost because we don't take that on. So what have we done about that? Well, we've worked to coordinate our job training and our voc ed programs to better match up our local educational institutions and our training centers with our local employers. That was the idea behind the new precision machining program at the Lower Pioneer Valley Education Collaborative, which Ludlow and Longmeadow, your question was from Longmeadow, are members of. The idea behind this is that kids take their academic classes in the morning, then they jump on a bus, they go over to that center, and they learn things like CNC operating, CAD/CAM programming. Those are the types of programs we need to expand on, we need to build out on, and we need to continually work to build connections and build collaborations between our employers and our local businesses.
Thank you. So moving on to another issue that's been of great concern in Western Massachusetts, the opioid addiction crisis claimed over 1,500 lives last year. Eric, you've talked about your work in passing a bill to reduce the price of Narcan and to control opioid prescriptions. Chip, you've spoken about this, that you've had experience as a part-time police officer dealing with this on the streets. So I'd like to hear specifically about what we can do more, what we can do in the future, not rehashing what we've done over the last term, but what specifically the state can do to address this problem in the next 2 years. Senator Lester, you can go first.
Yeah, very, very important question. And unfortunately, we have quite a lot more that we need to do around substance abuse. So one very important thing is more than 3/4, over 75% of the heroin deaths that we saw last year began with legally obtained prescription drugs. We worked collaboratively with the Baker administration last year on a substance abuse bill that focused predominantly on prevention. What we need to do is we need to go even further, and we need to bring the medical community into the discussion. So we need to beef up training at our medical schools. We need to include prescribers and pharmacists, physician's assistants. I spoke to a group of physician's assistants at BayPath recently. They're really on the front lines of this. We need to train our medical providers, and we need to change the culture around prescribing of some of these very dangerous narcotics. And there's another issue here that's very important and that's worth discussion, and that is the role that insurance companies and the sort of structural economic system is playing in pushing this epidemic. And here's what I mean. Right now, if somebody goes to a doctor, they go to a hospital, or they go to a medical provider and they have pain, and that doctor or that provider gives them a Percocet or a Vicodin or prescribes a highly addictive narcotic, which may be completely appropriate and completely in line with the science and what the data suggests. That treatment is reimbursed at more than a 90%, even 95% rate by the insurance company. What isn't reimbursed at the same rate are non-narcotics based pain management techniques, things like acupuncture, physical therapy, other types of remedies that aren't addictive. So what we need to do is we need to begin to reorient our prescribing culture and our insurance system to provide more opportunities for people to get treatment for their pain through avenues that are not highly addictive and that don't have the potential for this type of abuse. So those are the types of things we need to work on in the coming months, and that's what we're going to continue to be focused on. One last thing, I realize we're going on, but I'll make sure Chip can make up on the time. But another item is we need to increase collaboration of our law enforcement communities. Right now, you have a constellation of law enforcement agencies working on substance abuse prevention. You have the DEA, you have our district attorney's office, you have our sheriff's office, you have the local police departments in each city and town, you have the state police, you have the FBI, you have a broad constellation of agencies and groups all working on this. What we need to do is we need to put some investment in and some thought into how we sync up efforts, how we coordinate efforts, how we better share information, so that we're not being duplicative and that we're being as effective as possible.
All right. Thank you, Chip.
So this issue I've talked about from a very personal level, even when a couple years ago when I was involved in the same race, because as a part-time police officer, as you mentioned, Dan, I have stood in the kitchen consoling a mother while her son is being worked on by paramedics in the basement. So everybody who's watching and everybody in this room right now, we all know somebody who has struggled, maybe possibly still struggling. It's really reached into every community. It doesn't matter if you live in Belchertown or Longmeadow or Springfield or Chicopee, it's everywhere. And it's really multi-leveled, I guess I can say. So from the federal government level, we do need to do something about our borders, whether it's building a wall or something like that, but these drugs are literally pouring into this country, and they're ending up right here in the New England area. We have some of the cheapest heroin than any other place in the entire country. That needs to be taken into consideration, and our local delegation, the local legislative delegation, needs to put some pressure on our congressional delegation to do something about what's taking place and the drugs that are coming in here. When you notice that we've been involved in this war in Afghanistan for many, many years, but yet the poppy production in Afghanistan is higher now than it's ever been. There's something that is to be said about that, because the poppy seeds are what makes the heroin. The other component that we can really do on a legislative level is streamline the process so that private vendors who do addiction care services for people can get into the market. Right now, there are agencies out there that are trying to become addiction counselors that are going to be able to take Medicaid and Medicare patients, but they can't until they get certified by the state. And that document is a 196-page document that they need to adhere to. It's much too cumbersome. It's much too much bureaucracy that takes place. And we see this all the time when government gets involved. They make it more difficult for people to get into this service. So as your state senator, I'm going to lead the charge to streamline that process so that private vendors can get into addiction counseling. And it's not just for the Griswold Center or AdCare or some of those other agencies that are in the area, but private agencies can get into it, because we really do need a lot more outpatient services that are available for people. Another thing I want to mention too, and this hasn't even been really brought up in the newspapers yet, but there's a new drug that's coming up here. It's called carfentanil, and it is 100 times more potent than fentanyl. Heroin, which is a obviously highly addictive drug, these are synthetic versions of those. And carfentanil, Narcan can't bring you back from carfentanil. You need multiple doses of Narcan to do that. I'm very concerned that when that hits the New England area, the death rate is going to skyrocket once again. If you thought it was bad, it's going to get worse. And that's being discussed within the law enforcement community right now. And our local legislators need to be aware of it, because we need to be prepared for it. The amount of beds that are existing out there are just not enough for people who are truly trying to get themselves clean and healthy. And we need to support those families that are working on it. Like I said, we all know somebody who's struggling with it. There's too much available to them, and quite frankly, the prescription drug companies need to be held accountable as well too. Narcan, I've seen it used. I've watched our paramedics use it. It's a great drug, but that is another drug that the pharmaceutical companies are also profiting from. We need to hold them accountable for the amount of drugs that are on the street, and the Massachusetts legislature needs to take the lead on that.
Thank you, Chip. So this next question comes from a reader. It's directed at you, Chip. It reads, Mr. Harrington, you said you switched parties in part because you aligned with the Republican Party on gun control. Does that mean you oppose universal background checks and banning assault rifles?
I would not change any laws that we have right now in Massachusetts. So to go back to the first question, when I switched from a Democrat to a Republican, there was a lot of reasons, but one of them was about the Second Amendment. I'm a legal gun owner. I carry as a citizen, and I also carry as a police officer. So I feel that the laws that we have here in Massachusetts are very good. I was FBI checked, I was fingerprinted, I was interviewed by my police chief, and I had to get 3 letters of recommendation. It was about a 4-month-long process. So in Massachusetts, we have a pretty good system in place. I wouldn't change a thing there. Other states have their issues. I'm not running for state senate in Texas. It's here in Massachusetts. So I'm fine with the laws that we have on the books, and I'm fine with protecting the people who are out there who are legal gun owners that enjoy the sport of shooting and enjoy the fact that they can go to a range and exercise their right to do that. But I also recognize that people there's a level of safety that people have when they have a gun, but they need to be trained properly, and we do a pretty good job here in Massachusetts. So yeah, 2 years ago when I ran as a Democrat, a very moderate Democrat, this was one issue that was a real sticking point for me as a Democrat, and I feel being part of the Republican Party it's a much bigger tent party. That, along with my fiscal conservatism, I find myself much better suited to be in the Massachusetts Republican Party versus the Massachusetts Democratic Party, because I do feel that the Massachusetts Democratic Party has moved much further to the left than I think most of you are even comfortable with out there.
Thank you, Chip. For you, Eric, if you could weigh in on the gun issue as well, do you support Attorney General Maura Healey's use of the state's gun laws to ban copycat assault-style weapons this year? Do you think her approach was justified, and was it supported by the law?
So I do think that the ultimate decision that she made was legal. but I disagree with the process, and I've spoken to her directly about this. You know, we have an obligation in the public sphere to operate in a collaborative way, to operate in a democratic way, and I believe that this was something that should have come through the legislature. It should have been vetted. It should have been discussed, and I've had very upfront and very frank and very good discussions and constructive discussions with constituents on all sides of this issue and on all sides of every issue. And the way we make decisions in a democracy is by taking in those decisions and by making determinations based on what we think is the best decision for the most number of people. So I disagreed with the process. I think making kind of sweeping changes like that by fiat or by executive order is often the wrong approach and can kind of break down trust. But I do think, you know, we have a serious problem and a serious plague in our country right now around assault weapons. The AR-15, which is the gun that was under discussion, that's the same weapon that was used in Newtown. It's the same weapon that was used in Orlando. It's the same weapon that was used in Aurora. And to minimize that, and it's also a weapon that, by the way, the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association has said is highly dangerous for law enforcement and in many cases is used as a way to outgun the police. So we have to take those kinds of concerns very seriously, and we have to make sure to, of course, protect the rights of gun owners. We have a proud legal gun owning tradition here in Western Massachusetts. We're only a mile or two from the Smith & Wesson headquarters, and we're only about a mile from the Springfield Armory. There's a long line and a long history, generations of people in our area here in Western Mass who have legally and safely and proudly owned firearms for protection, for hunting. That's not, I think, what the focus should be on. The focus should be on how we crack down on and how we prevent the trade and the sale of illegal guns and on dangerous illegal assault weapons that are threatening our police and threatening the safety of our communities.
Could I follow up on something?
Yeah, briefly.
When we talk about this issue, it comes up quite a bit during a campaign, and many people in this district are very pro-Second Amendment. I think it has more to do, every example that you just used about those, you know, massacres and horrible shootings, those were mental health issues. I think people with mental health got a hold of an illegal gun in some way. That needs to be taken into account. The people in this area who are law-abiding gun owners, I think by, you know, when we talked about what Maura Healey had done as far as expanding the assault weapons definition, it made a lot of legal gun owners suddenly illegal, and they've had these things for many, many years. And that process I just think was wrong, but more mental health needs to be taken into consideration. I had a discussion with somebody asked me about, you know, what are we gonna do about getting all these guns out of crazy people's hands? And they said, you know what, as a legal gun owner, when I'm walking through the mall and the bad person comes through to start shooting, I'm gonna get into a gunfight to keep you alive, because you need the responsible gun owners out there who are going to protect you against people with mental health issues who get their hands on illegal guns in some way. And just because you make it more difficult for people to get their hands on a gun, it doesn't mean that those illegal guns are still going to exist. They're still going to be out there.
Thank you, Chip. And if we could keep the answers brief, we are running out of time.
Really?
Yes, it's getting there. So as we sit here in downtown Springfield, we can see from the windows of this office building, I-91 carves a swath through the center of Springfield through downtown. It cuts it off from the river. A consultant with the cultural development agency Future City, which is working on development plans in Springfield, has said that configuring I-91 to connect the riverfront to downtown Springfield could transform Springfield economically, could attract future investment, spur cultural growth. Do you think this is a project worth pursuing? Is it something that we should be investing money and time in at the state level? And Chip, you can field this one first.
Yeah, anything that is worth pursuing, anything you're talking about expanding the economy in Springfield. You know, Springfield's the center of our universe here. If Springfield does well, so does Ludlow and Longmeadow and East Longmeadow, and the entire region does well. So we certainly always want to incentivize Springfield to do well. And that's one of the reasons I'm getting into this race, because I think that we have that big gap right there. So if there's ever a plan to do something with a corridor, whether it's street levels, connect ourselves to the river, that's certainly worth looking at. But we always need to be cognizant of the costs of these things. We look at the city of Boston, and they had their big dig. Sure, it made a tremendous amount of improvements, but it was the largest construction project in the world at the time. It ended up going billions and billions of dollars over budget. as somebody who runs their own business, I want to be very mindful of your tax dollars and make sure that any improvements that we're making down here are certainly going to be done in a very responsible way so that your tax dollars are being spent wisely. And I think that's something that our Massachusetts legislature has kind of lost their focus a bit. You know, President Rosenberg recently said that Massachusetts has a revenue problem. I don't think we have a revenue problem at all. I think we have a spending problem, quite frankly. And looking at things like welfare reform, programs like that, that's where we can put some money back into our neighborhoods and redirect them towards programs that are going to truly incentivize businesses to come down here. And if it don't, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Chip. Senator Lesser.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Mark Davies' kind of analysis and looking at the barrier we have to the river. Mark Davey works for an organization, as part of an organization called Future Cities, which looks at the way we revitalize and reinvest in our urban centers, places like Springfield or Holyoke or Chicopee close by. It's modeled off of really transformative investments and redevelopments that have happened in places like Somerville, for example, which used to have economy very similar to Springfield's and then made that transition to an innovation and a high-tech economy. I worked actually to bring Mark to Springfield for that event that you're referencing, where he made those comments about the I-91 project through actually work we did at the Mass Cultural Council. And actually that work at the Mass Cultural Council was under threat when a veto was put forward of a 60% cut to those programs, which would have made investments like what Mark was just talking about impossible. I think it's absolutely worth looking at. It's certainly a long-term project. We have an opportunity because right now we're doing a several $100 million renovation and refurbishment of I-91 in the exact place where we would consider moving it below grade or underground. It's probably not something that can happen in the short term or in the immediate term for obvious logistical and cost reasons, but I think it's worth examining because here's the thing. If we take a look at it and we study it and it comes back and it says it's going to be too expensive, as Chip was mentioning, or it's not going to be feasible, that's valuable information to know. So then we can know that and we can move on to other projects and other places to focus our attention. But if the research comes back and says, it actually could be realistic and it could be affordable if we thought about it a little bit differently, if we did this in a creative way, if we worked on it, if we phased it in certain respects, and the benefits would be 10, maybe 100 times what the cost would be in terms of imagine having open access to the Connecticut River from downtown Springfield, what that would do for the community, what that would do for the businesses here and for the folks and the people that live here. I think it's worth pursuing, and that's valuable information for us to know.
Thank you. So Chip, you had just mentioned the budget crunch that Massachusetts currently finds itself in. Governor Baker's administration recently announced a projected $294 million budget gap, citing lower than expected sales tax revenue. The administration is considering public employee layoffs and program cuts to fill this gap. So how would you fix the budget? Obviously that's a complicated question, but in a few words, are there cuts that should be made? Are there ways to raise revenue that you would support? And we'll start with you, Senator Lesser.
Yeah, no, very important topic and very good question. So a couple of things. There's a couple of things we have to look at when you're handling a tough budget picture. One is you have to go over the budget with a fine-tooth comb, and you have to make sure that you're squeezing every last efficiency, every last ounce of savings out of every program that you possibly can. That means making sure programs are working well and are working efficiently. I've worked actually very collaboratively with members of the Republican caucus in the Senate on things, for example, like innovation in government initiatives, digitizing records, moving more of our kind of very lethargic state bureaucracy into the 21st century in terms of RMVs operating online, things like that. Saves a lot of money, allows you to then reinvest that either back into the public through tax cuts or through better and more efficiently run programs. The other thing that we need to do is we need to take a look at our tax code in this state because quite frankly what's happened over the last generation or so is the tax code has quickly and very dangerously shifted so that those at the very, very top are paying less and less of a share, and folks like us who are in the middle are paying a lot more as a share of our income, and that is very unfair. So one thing I would advocate for is, for example, there are hundreds of millions of dollars in tax expenditures, write-offs for corporations, tax breaks for different corporations in the state. I would look at. I think all of that needs to be on the table when we're looking at a budget crunch and saying, okay, it might be worth closing some corporate tax loopholes if it helps pay for kindergarten teachers in Springfield, or it helps fund the substance abuse programs we're talking about, or it helps cover the mental health screenings and the mental health advocacy that Chip talked about earlier. So I think that's the prism I would look at. We have to, as a threshold matter, we have to get as much efficiency out of government and out of the system as possible. That's an absolute essential. And we also have to work on making our tax system fairer, so that those who have the ability pay their fair share, and that people who require a little bit of a break get that as well.
Okay, thank you, Chip.
Yeah, it's the biggest question, right? How do you spend my money wisely? And I think as a government, historically, we haven't done a very good job. We have, as I mentioned before, some people say that we have a revenue problem. I don't believe we have a revenue problem. I do think we have a spending problem. The one thing that I talked about during this campaign is what I mentioned a few minutes ago, welfare reform. When you have 3, 4, 5 generations of people collecting state benefits, there's a problem there. There needs to be significant reform taken into account. Suzanne Bump, our Democratic state auditor, has been doing a great job of vetting out these people who are abusing our system. Not only on the user side, but also on the vendor side, the store owners who are taking advantage of people. Programs like this are supposed to be for people who are in a difficult time to get themselves to a better time. It's not supposed to be a lifestyle. It's not supposed to be the way you run your life, and then now you become generational. And that's where we find ourselves right now. There are enormous savings that could be taken into account there. But we need to go out there and find that and make it streamlined. We need to incentivize people to get back to work and put people back into the economy in that way, through training and job skills along those lines. As I mentioned, in Massachusetts, historically, we have a lot of programs that do some pretty good things for people, but it becomes too bureaucratic often. When was the last time you went to the Registry of Motor Vehicles, or using some other state services? We've done a nice job of getting closer and closer to a more automated system. We need to start doing more of that, so that we're not constantly just backfilling jobs with people, where we can do things more offline and save those tax dollars. We've got a lot to offer here in Massachusetts. We have a wonderful state that we live in, but the Pioneer Valley specifically, and that's all I'm concerned about, is the Pioneer Valley in western Massachusetts, and how funds are going to be brought back here from the eastern part of the state. We don't get our fair share of revenue from the Boston area, and you don't need a legislature that's kind of just going along to getting along. You need somebody who's going to go there and make some noise, and I've done it for 25 years on a local level as a selectman, a school committee member, and a community activist. In fact, this year in the school committee, for the first time ever, I would challenge anybody in the state of Massachusetts to see what school committee actually turned back $100,000 back to their town government. We did it in Ludlow because we're very efficient, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
Thank you, Chip. Let's talk again about public safety. Springfield continues to suffer from a reputation for dangerousness. The violent crime rates have decreased in recent years. They're still elevated well above the national average. And at the same time, recent allegations of police misconduct in the city have sparked claims by several city councilors that the city is not transparent in dealing with these issues, and even some calls to replace the police commissioner with the civilian police commission. These are local issues, but as state legislators, you have some role in setting criminal justice policy. What role should the state play in improving public safety here in Western Mass and improving police accountability? And Chip, we can start with you.
Sure. Well, I've attended the Corrections Academy, and I've also attended the Intermediate Police Academy. And I can tell you there's been a tremendous shift in the academies and the professional development that takes place every year for police officers towards exactly what we're talking about, working more collaboratively with the citizens. We've got some great police officers, there's no doubt about this. Every police officer that I know, they're in it for the right reason. They're trying to do the right thing. And there are some, unfortunately, a small percentage of bad people out there who get involved in this business. Springfield has had issues for numerous years. What takes place on a local level, as far as the commissioner versus a board, a civilian board, that's a local issue. And as a state senator, I'm going to support whatever the people in this community support. I'll go to the State House and fight hard for whichever they choose to do. It is a local issue. But the perception in Springfield right now is that it's not a safe city. The downtown, people are not coming down here. Every restaurant owner that I know, they say the same thing, that there's just not the crowds coming down here like we once had. When I was going to college at Westfield State College, this was always the place to be. There was so much going on. Worthington Street was a real happening place. And there's still some great restaurants and great places to go, but people from the suburbs aren't coming downtown. The perception needs to be changed. It needs to be a higher emphasis put on public safety so that people will feel comfortable coming down here. And however the leaders in the city of Springfield, whether it's the city council, the mayor, whatever they decide to do, I'm going to work hand in hand with them as the state senator to make sure that that happens, because we do have a lot of great assets down here, and people need to come down here and be a part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Eric?
Well, thank you, Dan. So it's a vitally important issue, and I'll break it into two parts. First part of your question was on public safety specifically. So there's a few things here that are very important. You used the word reputation, and I think it's important to understand that a lot of these issues are perception issues, and there's a lot of wonderful things actually happening, not just in downtown Springfield, but in all of Springfield right now. We mentioned a few of them: the new Valley Venture Mentors opening, the new Innovation Center, the new Cultural District, just a few blocks from here. So we need to do a better job of kind of boosting the self-esteem of our area and saying, we have a lot of great stuff happening and a lot of great things happening, which is one of the reasons why I've worked in my role as chair of Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development on new funds, for example, for the Spirit of Springfield, to bring in more visitors, bring in more attractions, more energy, share the story of all the great stuff that's happening here, and also, very importantly, to help market our region to a broader audience, to a regional audience, so that we can combat some of those perception issues and some of those unfair, I think, reputation issues, and do as much as we can to put best face forward all the time. That's very, very important, especially as we try to attract new business, attract new investment for the future. Another item: more police on the street. We need more cops on the beat. We specifically need more community police efforts, which is why I've worked very closely on, for example, the C3 community policing effort, things like Shannon grants on a state level that we've worked on to get more support to the Springfield Police Department and to all our police departments in Western Massachusetts who are working on this. This is why I've worked collaboratively with Mayor Sarno on their effort to hire dozens of new police officers in line with the MGM opening that's going to be happening in two years. There's undoubtedly going to need to be a state element to that, state support to make that successful. The other thing we have to acknowledge about public safety is it goes hand in hand with our substance abuse crisis, and we cannot get a handle on the public safety issues facing our area until we get a handle on the substance abuse crisis, which is why I've worked, for example, voted to increase the penalties for trafficking of fentanyl, which is a very dangerous additive to heroin. It's also why I've worked on a new, for example, with the State Department of Public Safety, on a new heroin trafficking task force to improve coordination among these different groups. It's also why I'm a strong advocate of reorienting our criminal justice and our public safety approach around public safety away from the lock 'em up and throw away the key model and towards a model that focuses more on treatment and prevention of these types of issues in the first place. And as far as community and police relations go, which was the second part of your question, I was getting there. So the second part of your question, I think unfortunately right now we are facing a deficit of trust. And when that happens, we need to work on getting people in rooms together, increasing collaboration, increasing discussions, increasing face time, frankly, between the two communities. That's why I think community policing is so important. That's why I've been an avid supporter of the C3 initiative in Forest Park, which we represent part of, and other areas of Springfield. It's also why I've been a strong advocate of increased and improved training at our police academies and for our law enforcement, so they feel the support they need to be able to go out and do what is a very dangerous and very tough job day to day. They need to know, police need to know that their state government supports them, and the community members that often feel like they don't have a voice in the process need to feel like the state is supporting them as well.
Can I follow up? You have more time.
Sure.
Okay, just a quick one. One thing that is proven to work is community policing, and in the town of Ludlow, where I work as a police officer, we hire people from that community. So when that person responds someplace, more than likely they're well known within that community. I would like to see, not just the city of Springfield, all cities in the state, start hiring people from those neighborhoods and then put them back into those neighborhoods as police officers. There's a great deal of respect that's taken place when your neighbor who lives in your neighborhood is also the police officer. That's the old model of community policing, and it worked. I would like to see a return to that. And if there's a way that the state government can incentivize local police departments to start bringing in, people who grew up in those neighborhoods, who are interested in law enforcement, and then to stay in those neighborhoods as law enforcement officials, that works. That's very powerful when you know the people on the street and they know you. There's a mutual respect back and forth.
Thank you. So this will be our final question. It comes to us from reader Kristen Nielsen of Chicopee, a retired nurse, and it concerns the recent layoffs at Bay State Medical Center, which is a cornerstone employer in Western Massachusetts. The question is, what is your plan to help Bay State bounce back from a bad year? How can the state ensure a more regionally equitable healthcare coverage plan? Eric, you can start.
Great. Now, it's a very, very important issue. One of the most important challenges we face, frankly, for a few reasons. One, Bay State employs 14,000 people in Western Massachusetts. It's by far the largest employer in our region. It would be devastating for our communities if something were to happen to that. Second element of it is it's the only level 1 trauma facility in all of Western New England. So if something happened to Bay State, it would be a critical loss of access to health care for our communities. People would either have to go to Hartford, or they'd have to go to Worcester, or they'd have to go all the way to Vermont to get the kind of access to the quality care, or to Albany, to the type of care that Bay State provides. So it's important for people watching to understand there's really two things happening right now that's creating the challenges for Bay State. First is there is a structural unfairness that we need to fix, which is that the way private insurance reimbursement rates operate, someone gets a heart transplant or a broken bone, for example, or some type of medical procedure in Springfield, the insurance company reimburses Bay State one price. The exact same procedure, the exact same injury, someone walks into a hospital in Eastern Massachusetts, for example, Mass General or one of the teaching hospitals there, the exact same treatment is billed at a higher rate. So what that means is that we're getting paid less for doing the exact same work here as hospitals in Eastern Massachusetts. That is outrage. People should be outraged by that, and it's something that we need to work on to close the gap. The second item that we have is an increasing portion of Bay State's patient population is what's called public payer. What that means is folks who are either on Mass Health or are on Medicare. Unfortunately, those programs, Mass Health and Medicare, pay a lower rate of reimbursement to the providers than private insurance does. And as the portion of patients who receive Mass Health or Medicare goes up and up for Bay State, that means, unfortunately, that their reimbursement rates go down and down. So it's important for people to understand this is a very significant issue. These are very important and very significant structural problems without how healthcare is operating in our state and in our country right now. So what we did is we put a team together, our Western Mass delegation, and we went and we asked for $5 million in funding to help bridge this gap and to help begin to create equity between Bay State and the other hospitals in the rest of the state. Unfortunately, we encountered significant resistance. Most of the resistance, as you can imagine, was from hospitals in the eastern part of the state that benefit greatly from this disparity. So we have a battle in front of us, actually, to make sure that this gets fixed, and we have a battle to make sure that Bay State gets the support it needs. I'm 100% committed to this. I come from a family of medical providers. Every member of my family, in fact, aside from me, is in the healthcare field, so I understand these issues innately and at my core, how important they are. And the important thing about it, it's going to require essential collaboration between our delegation here in Western Mass, our Eastern Mass colleagues, and very importantly, partners at the federal level who can advocate for the federal funding formula changes that are an essential part of what's causing the troubles for Bay State.
Thank you, Senator Lesser. Mr. Harrington?
Yeah, Bay State, my wife works at Bay State and has for many years, and Bay State provides a great service to everybody in this area. But as I understand it, again, the state government is involved in this, where the reimbursement that they recently were getting because of Medicare and Medicaid rates goes by the smallest hospital within the state. And there was some type of an accounting error where Bay State and all the other hospitals had to pay back millions of dollars because there was some type of an accounting error at the smallest hospital in the state. That seemed, when I first heard that, it seemed a bit crazy to me, but that is the system that the state requires them under to do it. And that has triggered so many of these layoffs that are dealing with right now. As you know, Eric had mentioned before, there are too many people who are not insured who are going to Bay State for very simple procedures, and we've had reform when it comes to our health insurance industry, not only in the state but the country. But it still leads people who are not insured walking into the emergency room looking for services. And as Bay State is in all hospitals, they can't turn anybody away. They must take care of them. So it's a huge drain when those people are walking in and getting services because they're not insured, and Bay State's eating the cost mostly for those things, which triggers everything else. As a state senator, I'm certainly going to be working with our officials here at Bay State Medical, but more work needs to be done on the state level, and Governor Baker has endorsed my campaign, and he understands this issue very, very well because this is the kind of industry he came from. He has some plans in place that are going to benefit places like Bay State Medical and all of our local hospitals, because they are one of the biggest employers in this district. We need to make sure that they're getting by, and they're also providing great care as they continue to do. But I'm looking forward to working with Governor Baker on this issue to make sure it gets fixed.
Well, that is all we have time for tonight. I'd like to thank both candidates for coming out and for having a thoughtful discussion. I'd like to thank you for tuning in.